Hello, welcome to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm under strict instructions to talk as loud as I can from Kai Delaney. It's Dan Morgan, Oliver Connelly and Kai Delaney for this week's edition. And we are going to take you through Liverpool's mid-term report. Joel Rabinowitz penned his on Liverpool.com this week. So head over to there to check that out. We might even put a link on this, depending on where you're looking at it or listening to it, as to where you can read his assessment of Liverpool's season, if you like, broken down in different parts. And that's what we're going to do, because we're sick and tired to the back teeth of talking about centre-halves, we're talking about FSG, and we're talking about Liverpool not winning games of football. So with me, Dan, is Ollie and Kai, as I've mentioned, and we are going to run through the categories, which are Player of the Season, Team Performance of the Season, Individual Performance, Goal of the Season, Moment of the Season, Player with Most Surprise Impact, Most Disappointing Underperformer, the Low Point of the Season, and the Worst VAR Call of the Season. So hang about until the end for that one, because I'm sure it will go off. Ollie Connelly has got a list as long as the Second Amendment, I think. So let's start. I'll kick us off, shall we? Player of the Season. I am going to still go with Andy Robertson. I think he started the season incredibly well. I think he was our player of the season up until probably the start of December. And I think his tail off is not expected, but I think it's the most understandable across the squad. I think the games in his legs are incredible. I think his ability to go again in the engine on him is incredible. And I think at times it's to his detriment. I think he's probably the one who's suffered most with not having a proper break, with not having a proper pre-season, and with not having a winter break. But given what he is like and what we know he's like physically, I would back him 100% to get back on that train and just find another gear over the coming months, the running. I just think it's hard not to ignore, or it's hard to ignore how good he was, in the first part of this season. He was absolutely incredible. Some performances that stick out. I think he was unbelievable against Chelsea away. I think the Merseyside derby at Goodison, he's on the next level, and he's gone up a gear for me. I just think the circumstances of what's gone around him has probably hindered him a little bit, as it has the entire squad. So my player of the season is Andy Robertson so far. Kai, I'll go for yours.
Yeah, so had a bit of a decision to make with this one. Kind of went through the squad, and honourable shout for Salah, while he's probably been out of form recently with the rest of the top three. That's been well documented. He's still the top scorer in the league, which is incredible considering he hasn't scored in the league for 4 or 5 games. And then another shout for Gini Wijnaldum as well, while he's not maybe had the grabbing all the headlines and things this season. I think with all our midfield problems, he's been Mr. Consistent, and always delivers a 7 or 8 out of 10, and is there for Klopp to pick and rely on each week when most of the other midfielders this season have been unavailable. So I think a shout to him as well. But for me, I couldn't look past Fabinho. I know it was Joel's pick as well in his piece, and I think where would we be without him is all I can say, really. We've lost, obviously everyone knows we lost Van Dijk, and the issues we've had at centre back with Matip and the other injuries that we've picked up. And he's a holding midfielder, but he's dropped into centre back, and his performances this season, he's probably been one of the best centre backs in the Premier League or even Europe. You'd never know he's not a defender. He's looked like he's played there all his life. And for the majority of the season, it's been Fabinho plus one at the back. So yeah, I'd hate to think what position we'd be in if he hadn't have stepped up so well and filled that gap. So yeah, Fabinho for me.
Ollie?
Yeah, those were my two. I feel thrown off there. I'm spying Robbo's face there over Kai's shoulder as some kind of either product placement or bid to steal this crown.
I'll
The
come
Robbo
to you
one's
first for the next one, mate. Don't worry.
the Robbo one's interesting because I agree with you on this kind of mini dip recently. It's the most explainable one and the most like, oh, you've almost earned a fortnight off, mate. You've run yourself into the ground. Him taking on more of the creative burden this season has been fascinating. Also, in terms of corners and set pieces, he had this kind of run through the Scottish internationals where he really reached the level that was. This is breaking out of any kind of Liverpool bubble of saying he might be the best left back in the world to like almost a definitive fact that it's amongst him and two other lads. Like that's the level he reached, and that's not the level that's expected. That's why this little so-called mini dip now is just him, I think, reverting back to type mostly. And we've come to expect now that he's a guy who can completely break open a game with his pace and delivery from out wide. So I think he's right there. Fabinho is obviously unquestionable. I'll throw Alisson in too. I know he's probably not played as many games, you would say, to count for this one, but I just keep going back to, as I referenced last week, he's just become such a match winner now in a way that was not expected of him before. I think similar to the Robertson situation, Oblak is unbelievable at Atletico Madrid. He does almost live on his own planet. And there's been some questions about Alisson's delivery, I guess, this year. But in terms of shot stopping and just winning you raw points on his own, he has gone to such a level that it is just him and Oblak, and I would have him still a decent distance ahead of him, which even 12 months ago you couldn't really say.
Okay. Good choices there. I'll come back to you, Ollie, for the next one, which is team performance of the season.
Yeah, Crystal Palace is the obvious one, right? 7-0 makes the most sense. But I just love there's something about that Atalanta away game where I left that being like, it's on. Dynasty, back to 2 European Cups, back-to-back league titles. Let's have it. It had all the old zest and all the elements of the old team. It had the Salah breakaway goal, had this new lad completely on fire, and you really felt like that they will overcome this. That they will find a way to navigate through these murky centre-back waters. And I thought that was past the blip of any kind of hangover from winning the league title. So to me, there's more of an intangible element to that night as much as anything else in terms of the actual passing of the football. But the way they moved the ball that night is that in Chelsea away, I thought in terms of the way they moved and recycled the football was unbelievable. But the speed of that night against Atalanta, here comes this frisky team from Italy, everyone loves, goals galore, and they just tore them apart. And it was like, no, we are a whole other level above this group stage competition. We don't concern ourselves with that anymore. We've raised our game to the semi-finals, final four type level.
Do you think that and the Palace game examples how all of this is sort of built on a bit of a tightrope, in that sort of when it goes good, it's like levels of 5-0 away in the Champions League, 7-0 in the Premier League, and I know that's not all the time, but almost, it does feel like, and it has at times through Klopp's tenure, that we live on this high wire act constantly of it being either extremely unbelievably good or frustratingly bad.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the difference is last year it was that high wire, but they would still eke out the win last year.
They were in control of the narrative a lot.
And this year it's like either, it was win or win in such a spectacular way. We're talking about the Invincibles and Sky's Win or graphics of the greatest teams of all times. And this year it's win and you're like, oh, wow, they're still there. Or obviously, I mean, it's 5 wins in 15 games now. It's no longer talk of if this is a crisis. I mean, that's the numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah, completely. Kai?
The Palace one is an obvious one to look at. For me, I had to go back a bit earlier into the season. It was Liverpool 3, Leicester 0 in November. So, Daniel, this is why you should go first.
No, well, let's both chat about it. I think that's probably the best way to do it. If we have a duplicate one, we both chat about it. So go on. Why is it yours? And I'll tell you why it's mine.
For me, it was looking at the table at the time. I think we were 4th going into it. Leicester was 2nd. Obviously, a couple of points above us at the time. And it was the 9th game of the season. So there's that old adage, the first 9 to 10 games, you get them out of the way, see where you are. And we were approaching that point. And Leicester, as they were up there last year and fell away at the end after lockdown and things. If that hadn't happened, they probably would have got Champions League. But first few games this season, they were up in 2nd, and it just felt like such a commanding performance. Obviously, it was a 3-0 victory. It could have easily been more. You remember the scrambles, the half a millimetre for whatever Firmino's goal wasn't over the line, so it could have been 5 or 6. And it felt like for me, it was obviously it didn't the way the season has transpired, but at that time it felt like, no, we are the champions. You're the pretenders. And here we are.
That is why it's mine. Is that it was Liverpool telling the world that this is what this team is about yet again. It was daring the world to doubt Liverpool. You know, some of the narrative around that game is so easily forgotten. There's no Salah and there's no Trent. Salah, I think he's got COVID at the time through the break with Egypt, and Trent gets his knock at Man City. And James Milner is absolutely incredible at right back, by the way. And it's quintessential Klopp, Pep Linders, Peter Kravich's using what they've got and making a game plan around it to beat an opposition. And it was literally using Milner with his passing to just get Liverpool to cut through about 3 different lines of Leicester's block. And they were in time and time again. Diogo Jota there's the Atalanta performance we just touched on. I think it's his best league performance for us, probably. And then capped off at the end by the fact that all this talk is on Roberto Firmino not scoring, and he gets one right at the death. And it was just a reminder of, this is the big boy league. You know, this is, you come at the king, you best not miss kind of thing. And Leicester have almost fallen foul to that, in my opinion, in the sense that they've kind of become this easy target for Liverpool in many people's eyes, or they just play into Liverpool's hands. It's not the case. Liverpool set up in a manner each and every time which specifically deals with Leicester's threat, and it's a different threat every time. And I think that was another game whereby we looked at it, we were pragmatic to what they were going to do, and we just showed why we were champions. I think you're completely right.
I've been calling those Big Brother games all season. I think you've seen it time and again. It's fascinating. It's why this run of games that could be intimidating over the next 6, 7, 8, I actually think could be okay. And it's just what they need is these games they had early in the season. Chelsea, I get they got a man sent off, but hey, here's the new title contenders. Sit down, we'll pass the ball around you for 85 minutes, no problem. Same with the Leicester one. The Tottenham one's a bit more iffy. Tottenham played pretty well, executed their game plan, but still came away with the results. Away at the Etihad for 45 minutes, unbelievable football, unbelievable. You know, okay, you're going to have a resurgence this year. Watch this, 45 minutes, new system, new approach, tore them apart. So that to me is the one that was the most consistent, concise through the whole performance of, you think you're at this level this year in this weird season where you might be able to have a title bid? This is how champions really do it.
It almost feels as well that it was the time in which Liverpool, it almost feels like Liverpool's December peak usually came in November. Mm-hmm. It feels like this was Liverpool at the fittest, at the physically sharpest. And it's easy to remember that City game, they trudged through the last half of that, but they've got the break. I think it's something like 2 weeks between that and Leicester, and they just come back looking absolutely revitalised. And after that, you know, again, it seems to dip, and we seem to struggle there physically in December, but it just feels like around the time of Wolves, we were at our sharpest physically, and we showed in that game that, we were right on top of it.
I was just looking then as well at the table after that game. City were down in 13th, so they're 8 points behind us with their game in hand. So I think, as you say, we were looking so good and they were in there. Right, that felt like the time where we were really going to kick on and dominate the season.
Absolutely. Okay, Kai, I'll come back to you. Individual performance of the season.
I have stuck with the theme of my first pick, and I have again gone for Fabinho. It was his first performance at centre-back. So Chelsea away to 2-0, second game of the season. Van Dijk was still playing, and it was Fabinho's first game of the season back in there alongside him. And that was the narrative before the game. It was all about Fabinho. The teams came out, and it was Werner against Fabinho, and he was going to be destroyed, and Chelsea were going to win, and that was going to be the way the game was going to go. But I can't recall. He didn't make a mistake. He was phenomenal for the entire game. He outperformed Van Dijk over 90 when they were the two for that game. And there's not too much to say really. I think everyone that watched the game will recall how good he was and how impressive he was and how he kept Werner in his pocket.
I think we see a different side to him, don't we? I think we see just how good he is in a 1v1 situation in the last man. And you don't, obviously, he's got the screen behind him when he's playing in the six. But I think you're right. There's those two occasions where he's isolated out wide with Werner, and you're thinking, oh God, here we go. And you just see this whole other attribute to a player that you thought you knew inside out and comes to the fore.
And by the way, when he was at Monaco, he played at right back and he was awful. Like, he was dreadfully out of position. He constantly was doing these slide challenges from behind with these big gangly legs arriving from nowhere to just wipe people out. All of a sudden, he rocks up against Timo Werner, and he's the best one-on-one defender in the world.
Absolute crazy.
Yeah.
All right. I'll give mine. Big shout-out for me to Sadio Mane against Arsenal at home. Tries to kill everyone on the pitch in the first 5 minutes. Literally is all elbows and 2-footers. And then it's one of the most incredible individual pressing displays of football I have ever seen in my life. I have never seen a player as demented as Sadio Mane on that night. He is absolutely everywhere. He is pressing the life out of Arsenal's back four and goalkeeper, and he's turning them round whenever he gets the ball. I looked at him that night and thought, for all he descended to in 1920, I thought that was the manifestation of it. That was him sort of at Barca front three levels of sort of 2014-15. It was like, this is the stage and I'm playing on it and you're all playing my game. And I loved that game. It would have been my game of the season if I hadn't picked Mane in a performance, and Leicester did hold a soft spot. But that Arsenal game is another reminder whereby a team turn up to Anfield and go ahead in the game, I hasten to add, but then Liverpool just go, we're going to show you why we've just won what we've won over the last 2 years, and you're going to take it, and there's no other way around it. And we know what's happened since, and we know the hard luck stories we can all revert to, but that Liverpool team is still there. That Liverpool team will come back. That Liverpool team will have Thiago Alcantara in it, I hasten to add. So for me, it's a reminder. There are reminders in this season, despite all that's gone, of just how good they can be when they're at the strongest. Ollie, who's yours?
Yeah, well, I think Jota at Atalanta is probably the right answer. The two that stand out to me, one's going to get you off your chair, Dan. We're going to have a Paul Ince moment here. I think so. I think Curtis Jones at Fulham. I'm telling you, Curtis Jones at Fulham made me think this lad's going to be in this team for 10, 12 years. There is a grace, elegance, and an excellence that we just don't see from these academy players, and it's completely flipped my whole mindset on how they're bringing those players through. I never thought it was wrong, but you could see all the inner workings of, we want to have the most graceful footballers in Europe who can pass and move and do all that stuff with still a little bit of bite, still with the pressing intensity, and with an ability to come in from 1 week to the next fully fluent in the system, not necessarily having to do the Harvey Elliott route of going and getting basically university years where you can just go and be yourself, learn how to be around adults, do all that side of the game, and then come in and get your education week and just graduate them through the classes into the first team. And the guy can turn up. This lad, I cannot believe the development of him this year. I know that he's not been seen as much over the last few weeks, but there was that run there for 3 weeks where you were thinking they're going to have to find a way. They have to play him. He's becoming undroppable. And I don't think you can overstate just how spectacular he was in that run of games when other senior players were kind of, flitting in and out of big games that they needed to win, and he really stepped up.
What type of player do you see him being down the years, Ollie?
I think it has to be that kind of free eight. I think, the apex would be your Kevin De Bruyne, where it's like, it's almost the new all-around Gerrard-esque box-to-box midfielder, right, where they play in the channels a bit more than they did shuttle back and forth in the days. I think that you can see that. That is my overall question. I do kind of like him as kind of drifting in Bernardo Silva off the wing. That is exciting to me. I just don't think they're going to evolve that way necessarily. So I do think that's the big question. In the olden days, you'd say stick him at number 10, right? Let everything go a bit around him. But I just think it's getting harder and harder to play with that kind of manner, unless maybe, you evolve 4 or 5 years' time and Erling Haaland stood up front and you've got Curtis Jones sat in behind him. But the growth in the defensive side and the positioning stuff this season is something I did not think we would get for 2-3 years. I thought he would be the wild card off the bench. He could inject some turbo into the attack if things slogged down, play that Shakira role for a year or 18 months, and slowly but surely they could add the defensive element to the game. But they've almost leaned the other way, that we trust him positionally in the middle of midfield. When we needed to chuck a right back on against Brighton when things were going haywire, we stuck Curtis Jones at right back. We trusted him. I did not, for the life of me, see that evolution coming that fast with him.
I think there's a really interesting midfield, of Fabinho, Curtis and Thiago. And you imagine, so the sort of triangle pivot of the 6 and almost the 2 6.5s, which is ideally what the two of them like to play. Curtis is he's more reserved and more tactically adept rather than I gave him credit for. He's positionally someone who I think will evolve and grow as someone who dictates. I think now he's in this little bit of a halfway house between sort of wanting to be the player he was at the under-23s and at under-18 level, whereby he was all things to all men, and being what he's being told to be within this Liverpool side. I think getting that access of players, and that's not against Jordan Henderson or Gini Wijnaldum or anyone, by the way, but I just think to give those two players someone like Fabinho behind them, I think you'd see the creativity. I think you'd see the sort of tactical discipline that would surprise a lot of people for a midfield three that looks like that. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's a good shout. I'll come back to you. So, moment of the season. Oh no, goal. Have I missed goal of the season? Sorry.
Goal of the season. What did I have down for goal of the season? Probably something Salah related. Anything Salah's done this season. I actually might go the Salah at Atalanta, getting a vintage Salah moment where he was on the run. We haven't seen that in forever. It's all been gather and hit this season, but there is something so wonderful still about the Leeds one. The velocity, the noise it makes when it hits the back of the net. He really has just decided, I am a poacher now. You get me the ball in front of the net, I'll put it in, and we can all move on with our day. Those kind of breakaway goals that were so the hallmark of that first season. I mean, he scored every kind of goal that first season, but those were the best ones, right? Running, spinning in behind, all that type of stuff. I do miss those. The Atalanta one was a nice throwback, but yeah, I think I'll take that Leeds one, the first Leeds Salah.
Good shout. God, it feels like a lifetime ago. Kai?
I had it between two, both from the 7-0 Palace away. The first one for me is Firmino's first one. The counter starts on the edge of our own box. It's heavy metal football to go very, early doors Klopp. It's a 1-2 between Firmino and Robertson that spans the length of the pitch. The way that Robertson whipped it in and Firmino took it perfectly in his stride, one touch outside the foot into the corner. It was just beautiful. Didn't literally get me out of my seat, but got me excited. And the other one in that game was Salah's second off the bench. I think he scored a header and then he had the one outside the box after. And
that's no backlift. Amazing strike of the ball. That you gotta love a no backlift goal, Dan.
I do love a no backlift goal. For all Danny Murphy's faults, he was adept at a no backlift.
For me, that one was. It wasn't just the goal; it was everything, the circumstances around it. In the day before, all his interview with AS had come out with Barcelona, Real Madrid, and I still would be amazed if it wasn't an interview that he'd or his agent had kind of manufactured themselves. I don't think those kind of questions get asked without you knowing that they're going to be asked, and the answers were very well rehearsed, and it's in the club's hands and that kind of thing. And then obviously he was on the bench, and Klopp was asked before the game, is he on the bench because of anything to do with those comments? And of course he said no, and I doubt that was the reason, but it seemed like he came off the bench with a point to prove, and that goal was almost a goal out of anger, and just, no, I'm here and this is what I'm about.
Two for me. I'll give a very underrated goal, rather than my goal, but a very underrated goal is Sadio Mane's against Everton. Don't look at it as a counter-attack, look at it as Liverpool building through the play, building through the stages, and just absolutely right to left, tearing Everton to shreds. It's an incredible goal. The ball from Salah, I think, that misses Henderson out and ends up at Robertson's feet is completely intentional. It's an unbelievable well-worked team goal. And when you see that team on the pitch, you know, it comes when Van Dijk's still on the pitch. When you see that team and you just replace Adrian with Alisson, oh my God, you know, you sort of realise what we had in our hands for 10 glorious minutes. But the goal I'm going to go for is actually Jota at home to West Ham. And it's all because of Xherdan Shaqiri. They're both substitutes. They both come on the pitch with 15 minutes to go. It looks like Liverpool are going to draw. Henderson gives the ball to Shaqiri, edge of the box, and everything Liverpool are crying out for, he just does with this slide rule pass through about 5 or 6 players. And the run from Jota is just perfect. And the finish is so easy. And it's just, it's another way in which Liverpool beat you. And you can have this thing of, oh, we're going to sit in and we're going to get a draw. And teams are getting a lot of joy with it now. But around that time, Sheffield United, similar. Liverpool could kill you from the bench. And Liverpool would have different ways in which, if this isn't working, we'll find another way. It was just a reminder of just how good, how mercurially brilliant Xherdan Shaqiri is.
You can't forget the Lincoln one off that. Then, you know, that's my favourite goal last decade. I don't think he knew where Lincoln was. He woke up 10 minutes before on the bus.
Still had his backpack on when he took that free kick.
Unbelievable.
I think the finish at West Ham says a lot about Jota as well, because he had a square ball to Salah, and you got to remember, Jota was kind of in his pomp, and this is when he was scoring, and confidence would have been unbelievably high. But he's the new boy coming in. He's got Salah waiting for a tap in, who's missed the Liverpool, missed the goals, golden boot every year, and he's taken a shot on himself, and it's a brilliant finish. But if he misses that or he saves, the reaction from Salah would have rightly been a very angry one.
His confidence was so that he was never going to miss it. That was the thing, you know. That was just defined him at that moment, and hopefully he comes back in that mould. It's arguably the goal I've missed not being in my seat in the Kop for the most this season. I just think to be sort of down the throat of that in the stands, I just think it would have absolutely went off. And on that note, I will go next with moment of the season, and it was actually being back in seat 25, row 25, seat 141 for Liverpool 4, Wolves 0. Incredibly sort of poignant and emotional moment for me to realise, and which I do, by the way, how lucky I was to be one of the first 2,000 people to get back into Anfield when we were in Tier 2 in December. Was a thing in itself, but to cover it for Liverpool.com, which was a privilege, and to sort of tell that story and try and tell it to other people and give them a little sense of what it was like was great. And it felt like a sort of a civic duty. And I'm not being overly look at me with that. It was just sort of, I wanted everyone to be there. I wouldn't have been bothered if I wouldn't have seen another game live for the rest of that season if everyone else could have got in. And yeah, it was just a reminder that football was an actual real and tangible and emotive thing that we took in the flesh, and we lived for a long time, and something I probably took for granted, being a season ticket holder, which I know is a privilege a lot of people don't have. So yeah, let's hope they come back soon. But on that note, yeah, Ollie, what was your moment of the season?
Oh, one, seeing you back in Anfield. That was a delight. And that first video came through, I saw your beaming face. And yeah, I could see it, seeing your eye. I don't think I've ever seen you actually that emotional, particularly not in work. But no. You were completely moved by the moment, which I thought was right. And then, I mean, the moments are all from that night. It's the first time Klopp comes out and he makes a straight for a beeline to the crowd. He has no interest in this warm-up. That's irrelevant to him. And then obviously the first fist bumps after winning the game. And what I think is so poignant about it now and so frustrating about it now is the false start element to it all. that we had it back and the ride is here again. And although we all won't be in there at the same time together, we'll all get to go in our little bits, and then we can all at least have a bit of that feeling together, and it'll grow and grow throughout the season. And it's almost like its own journey to itself as it builds towards the culmination of having everyone back. And that false start element to it stings a little bit.
Genuinely, if Jota's my goal of the season that I missed most not being there for, then the moment I missed not being there for the most was when the record ended. We should have all been there. We should have all clapped him off. We should have all clapped each other off and said, look at the ride that we've just been on. Look at this. Let's go and do this again. And the manager doesn't get to have us there. We don't get to have each other to say, my God, we started this and we ended it. And we're here for each other now, and we get through the next one and the next one and the next one. And I think that's what's killing them at the minute. I really do. I think we can be overly, trite or emotive about this if we want to be. But I think the fact that he doesn't get to go in there and say, look at them, they all stayed, they clapped you off, they're with us, let's go and do this again. That separation is, I think it's a real disappointment, and it's a real thing that is physically hurting this team, I think. Did you give me a moment, Ollie? Or is that it? Is it me being back?
No. Yeah, I'll give you that one if you want. The first Klopp fist pumps with fans back.
Yeah.
I mean, give it to the man. He is a man for the moment. And a bit of extra mustard, a real wind up. Oh yeah, he's the best.
Kai, what's yours?
You're both going for the emotion there, aren't you?
Yeah, I know. Might wrap it up.
There haven't been many moments. Think of last season that we could have had 10 late winners to choose from and moments that stood out. There haven't really been that this season. Spurs at home is the obvious one, the late winner, and then to go on and was that was after Palace, was it, or other way around, just before Palace?
Before, yeah.
So you got kind of the late winner against Spurs, who are first v second, and that week it was Spurs' title to lose. Now it's City. It's been everyone since. But that at the time felt big. For me personally, it's a bit of an out there one, but it was actually before the season started, because same as most people, I haven't been fortunate enough to go back to a game or anything like that yet. It was, from a fan point of view and a work point of view, it was actually the 18th of September, which was otherwise known as Thiago Friday. So that had obviously been building up for weeks, and it felt like months of speculation. And then we started getting all these videos leak out from Thiago's camp saying thank you, Bayern, for my time there. So that happened, and then after what felt like a 15-hour day, put the laptop down and got a text saying that Jota's signing at 10 o'clock tonight. So on you go, and that all began again. So for me, that was pretty phenomenal to kind of work through and experience that. But obviously as a fan, just a real high point, thinking what could come this season, adding those two into the team from last season.
It was pure adulation those 2 days. It was pure sort of youthful exuberance and everything that you sort of remember from why you get into football. And when your team signs a great player, it's like the biggest thing in the world. It's a great thing. Are we just all agreeing that the player with the most surprising impact is Diogo Jota, by the way?
Yeah. I mean, surprising negative impact, Naby Keita. I really thought it was happening.
Well, we've got disappointing underperformance to come here, Ollie.
I've got plenty of people say for that one.
No, it's a good point. But yeah,
the Jota one. The thing that's most surprising is the variety of finishes, the out-and-out goal scoring, getting in sync to. Getting in sync to the system, almost being so brilliant that things had to shape around him a little bit. To say, okay, we're going 4-2-2-2 away at Man City. You are too good to leave out of this side, and we'll just all get onto the same wavelength. Don't worry right now that you're not tracking back with our principles on the right-hand side. We'll figure it out. You're too good going the other way for us to bother caring about it right now. That to me was the big surprise. I did think he would be kind of another element off the bench. I thought that he would be a long-term play, kind of a Mane type mini project from the manager and his team. But no, straight in with, left foot, right foot, headers, dinks, power finishes, everything you could hope for. A complete all-round play was not what I thought. It just was not in there in any of the analysis or the videos at Wolves, he was a completely different player than the one that arrived. And how they foresaw that, whether they even did, I have no idea.
Do you think it is that? Do you think he sort of took on a mantle himself and then confidence, everything else, he's just ran with it?
Yeah, I think that has to be it, right? You just get on a roll, yeah. And you know, when you play with great players, you automatically become a little bit better. And he's playing with 7 world-class players, you know, when he comes into the team. So it takes your game up a whole lot. He's getting chances and opportunities, and second and third chances he just wouldn't get at Wolves.
Yeah.
He for me, he was, as you just said, he was going to come in to be the rotation. He was our Riyad Mahrez off the bench to bring in when one of the top 3 need a rest. But the surprising thing for me was, I think it was before the Lincoln game, Pep Lijnders did the press conference, and he came out and said he's a pressing monster or pressing machine. And I think that obviously the coaching staff and Klopp would have rated him highly, but I think that showed how much they valued him and his assets that he was going to bring to this team. And it maybe looking at that, it wasn't such a surprise when they found a way to fit him in the team.
Also, potentially how they've seen him as a different player than what he came in and become. You know, we haven't seen much of the pressing, let's be honest. We haven't seen him be this pressing monster. He works hard for the team, undoubtedly. But the manner in which I think he's seen the opportunity that, listen, if he wasn't here, if he was still at Wolves and watching Liverpool now, I think he'd be sat there going, I could go into that side and do what he's eventually come in and done. Yeah, I think he could see that opportunity for himself. And what's what top players do at the end of the day.
There was a real giddiness in the voices at that time of the staff talking about him, both Klopp and Lijnders, at the time of, I think, like you're saying, I'm not sure if it's necessarily the player they didn't know they were going to get. They did the evaluations and all that, and they probably saw and spoke to people, given the relationships that Pep has with people in Portugal and what have you. He probably knew a bit more about him than most other people would know. But there was a real sense, I think, that we thought we were getting someone a little bit more raw than he actually is. And this is amazing. And he can do these 3 things we thought maybe we could get to, and he can do them right now. And this is going to be really fun. You could hear it seeping out of the press conferences.
Absolutely. All in agreement there. Okay. Kai, give me your disappointing underperformer of the season.
Again, I had 3 or 4. I won't go through them all because they're probably 1 or 2 of yours. But I decided on Sadio Mane. He hasn't been poor, but I think he's underperformed to his level. I think I was looking at his stats before. He's got 9 goals and 27 in all competitions, which it's not bad at all. But I think the level he set last season, and many people felt he almost overtook Salah as our most important player and our most important forward. I don't think he's reached those levels consistently this season. He's had a couple of spells. I'm not sure entirely on the numbers, but I think he's scored something like 4 in 5 and then 4 in 5 or 4 in 6. His goals have come in bursts this season, and then he's gone missing. I think he went 9 games without a goal for Liverpool, which is his longest stretch since he's become a Liverpool player. So again, he hasn't been poor by any means, but by his standards, I think he's underperformed. I
think he's looked lethargic. There's those little 15-minute unplayable spells he used to have, or like that turn. You know, they had the one against United against Wan-Bissaka where they almost get a penalty. You know, he just spins one on the edge of the box and is in behind and bringing real thrust to the attack that gets them on the move. There hasn't been as much of that. There's been whole passages of play where for 30 minutes you just haven't had even one of those moments. Whereas it was so consistent last year, and the goals, like you said, Kai. Last year he was in the Premier League. We had a great piece at the time on the goal taking you from a draw to a win. The MVP, basically, who gets the most important goals of the season. He was just lapping the field in the whole Premier League. He basically got the points to win the title and to have that level of a difference. And just when they've needed it this year, hasn't been there. So I think he's been consistent without the burst that take him from a 7 or whatever to a consistently 9 out of 10 player. I
think he's struggling most with how stifled it's become. I think that he's almost like, I don't know if you agree, Ollie, with your knowledge of American sports and stuff, but he's almost like he doesn't play as a conventional winger. He's almost like a basketball player in that he stands you up dead. He stops. There's times, let's see, where he'll stop dead on the ball, and there's no movement between him and the defender, and then it's a jink one way and it's the other. It's almost how he plays. He doesn't like necessarily running onto things. He doesn't like sort of something that's in a perpetual motion. He would rather, in many senses, attack on his terms and slow an attack down in many senses to then sort of execute it how he wants to execute it. And I think when those spaces aren't there, when those opportunities aren't there, we still see him do it. We still see him take a player out the game, but then there's just a wall of a defender behind a defender, a space that isn't there, an opportunity that isn't available to work a 1-2 or whatever. I think he's the one struggling the most, because he's great on breakaways. He's great on Liverpool when there is space and attack and space to run into, but the manner in which he attacks and his sort of skill set isn't cut out for football in a stagnated sense, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, he moves in like sudden jolts. It's in-out quickness. It's all that type of stuff. And I think that it's almost there's been a misreading, particularly with him, I think, from national analysts, of this idea of the low block and no spacing behind, like you're saying. And that's what stifled Liverpool. I think it's the cramped nature. It's how narrow everyone's defending. People aren't just saying we're sitting in a low block. We're sitting in 5 across the back, and we're sitting just the width of the penalty box. So when he goes past one guy or he tries to, there's just a second body you slam into, like, Silent Bob, or what's his name, stepping on the rake or whatever in The Simpsons. It's that kind of vibe, It's not the depth of the pitch, because, like you said, he's having to stop himself, and he'll go at his own speed because he knows he's quicker off the burst than almost any defender in the league. It's that once he goes past someone, that's when the space gets closed out.
But when you picture him at his best, it's breaking away, isn't it? Latching on the end of a through ball, running in behind, and there just hasn't been the space this season. But as I say, it's not poor, but just by his standards that he set so high last season, I think he's not quite reached them.
Okay, Ollie, who's yours?
Trent's the one. I do have one other one that is just a personal bugbear of mine, which was how bad Connor Cody was at Anfield, just that one performance. I was so here for a whole January discourse of should they go and get Connor Cody, and I'm all about that. Can the local guy, does he just perform better because he loves the shirt? I wanted us to have a month of content of Connor Codyisms, and 3 at the back was that's what I was after. And he was so bad that night that every Liverpool fan said, let's just not have this competition anymore.
That first goal was one of the worst defensive actions I've seen. Yeah, really bad.
But it's Trent, and that's the disappointing. That's been the most disappointing one. And I think it's patently understandable. And he's really young, and he's going to be fine. And I think you've already seen flashes in the last 2 games that it will start to come back, and I think come back quickly. And Joel had a great deep dive on this not long ago about that. This is the kind of stumble every young great player has at some point, which is when you kind of get a little bit figured out, and then people start adjusting to it. And then the great level is that you adjust to those adjustments, and you're still great. And then they try to readjust that, and there's no adjustment left to be made. And all of a sudden, you're a complete player who cannot be stopped. And so this is just that trying period. And if we weren't in a 24-hour social media news cycle, it would be frustrating if we just go into the match week to week that he's obviously struggling and it's time to develop, but it wouldn't be this kind of like tire fire assault on does he care and all that nonsense going on online. I think he's fatigued. I think he's a bit mentally exhausting. The whole squad it's rare in this kind of Pep Klopp era, even going back to just the post-Ferguson era, to have teams go at this level at that point for 3 years in a row. City had to have a breather last season. It's the same players for the most part this year. Bernardo was terrible last year. John Stones was terrible last year. They were exhausted mentally and physically. They reset, took a year off, essentially like a gap year of challenging for the title, and came back completely refreshed this year. Now John Stones is a great defender again. Bernardo's impacting the game again. And I think Trent, more than anyone, has that feel of, I need a rest. Give me a mental rest for a season.
Absolutely. I'll go through mine quickly. It will be Takumi Minamino. I think there's arguments that I'm not going to do it, Ollie. I'm not going to do it on here. I'll save them for our morning calls. I'll keep it dignified. There's arguments that he hasn't had a good crack in the side and he hasn't had a fair crack at the whip, and I get that. But I just think when you watch him play, you can see why. I just don't think, to be honest, he's going to make it as a Liverpool player. I don't think his body shape's right when he receives the ball, ever. I think he lends himself to being knocked off the ball and to be dispossessed very easily. And I think he's at a point in time his Liverpool career and this Liverpool team where this management team don't know how or where to use him to try and get the best out of him. And ultimately, when you do, it just feels like it's sticking a plaster over something that is hard to stop the wound. And to be honest, and I think that, in my opinion, I can't really recall a good performance he's had for Liverpool. I don't think he was that great at Crystal Palace, I'll be honest.
With him, I've written a 2,500 word mega profile on him at this point about the whole conundrum that people can go read if they want full thoughts. The one that I would jump on is this notion that he doesn't get opportunities. Players at this level make their own opportunities. I know it sounds trite, but Xherdan Shaqiri got a chance and was exceptional in minimal play, showed a different element to the side. Okay, we'll put him in the starting lineup. Like, that's just how it works at this level. You have to show every day in training and every glimmer of opportunity you deserve to. There is no bedding in period after 12 months at this football club. This is the style. We're trying to win league titles.
Klopp's narrative around Shaqiri when he put him back in every interview was he's training unbelievable. He's training through the roof. That's where you have to meditate. That's where you have to, and they're obviously seeing something there in Shaqiri, in Minamino, that isn't there. That isn't what they want and what they like. And by the way, before anyone wants to have a go at me or whatever about this, what I would say is it's absolutely fine for him not to work out. Like, it's absolutely fine for him to justify essentially being 7 million quid and being from the Austrian league. It's a risk that no one loses from, essentially. Liverpool took a chance on a player because the price of him was so low, and because the deal on paper from the player they saw at Anfield was a phenomenal no-risk gamble to take. So if it doesn't work out, then who's lost? Essentially no one. You can argue could have got a better player in or whatever, but he came in last January. Nothing lost.
There's also nothing wrong with having a 19th man who's pretty good, who plays, your final 2 Champions League group stages. Maybe chuck him in against Brighton at home during the season. He plays your Carling Cup or Carabao Cup games now. You need those players. And if you can raise the floor, at some point, Origi and Shaqiri are going to leave. They make decent money for squad players. At some point, you have to raise the floor of that squad level and get that through 19. Okay, I just don't think he's good enough to play at the Premier League level. But if they think that maybe in 2-3 years he's going to be functionable 16th man, then that's a fine investment for 7 million quid and cheap wages.
It's absolutely no risk. I think even if he goes in this summer transfer window, you're fetching 10 to 7 million for him from a Bundesliga club or whatever it may be. So no one loses.
Okay, we'll rattle through the last 2 quite quickly because I'm aware time's getting on. Low point of the season. Kai, give me yours.
Burnley.
Yeah.
It was obviously the moment we lost our home record, and it was the moment, to put it simply, that it felt for me it turned from a blip to more than a blip.
Fair play. Ollie?
The moment the news of Joe Gomez's injury came through. Yeah.
Interestingly, there is a video of that knocking around from this very podcast. But yeah, that just felt cruel, to be honest. That just felt very, come on.
Yeah. I mean, I in light of Van Dijk, obviously, it was the double blow, and the thinking maybe you could recover from this, and maybe still I think we'd win the league title, and then maybe you can do something in Europe. Maybe Van Dijk comes back. So to lose them both like that was, like you said, just cruel.
Mine was the Jurgen Klopp Des Kelly interview. I think it was after Brighton. I maintain that I've never seen a football manager of that level be spoken to like that by anyone in a professional capacity. I thought it was hugely personal. I thought it was manufactured in a way that he wanted to get his vendetta across, and I genuinely feel that it was bang out of order, and I still do to this day. I think it was really, really sort of crossing a line from what's expected and what's supposed to be objective interviewing and objective, in a sense, broadcasting from BT. I think they were bang out of order to allow it. Not saying whether they knew about it or not, but it certainly seems that it was encouraged at the time, and it certainly seems like it formed part of a narrative that became very ugly very quickly. And I'll be honest, I might be biased in this, but I was with Jurgen Klopp in scratching my head, going sort of what has just gone on there. Real low point, and one that winds me up still to this day, to be honest.
Were there stories going around that they were friends outside of football?
Yeah,
I don't know, something about them arm wrestling and nights out. I don't know how true it was, but stuff I saw after it.
Yeah, it was very distasteful in my opinion. Final one, worst VAR call. I'm going to go Fabinho against Sheffield United. To this day, I still don't know the rule about that, to be honest. To me, it's just like, yeah, that's a free kick. And if it happens 100 times again, I will probably go to the grave thinking that it was a free kick and not a penalty. And it was, a waste of everyone's time in many senses. Kai?
The offside Everton away, last minute Henderson winner, when Sadio Mane was not offside. I'd still stand by it. He wasn't offside.
Yeah.
And on the day we're recording this, they just changed the offside rule again.
Yeah.
They decided we're changing it again. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out before the end of the season.
Let City get 3 points and then we'll change the rules.
The one for me is Robertson at Brighton. I think you can still kind of consider, was it a penalty, kick the standing foul, all that stuff. It's just that one stings the most, because if they just got through that game, it was such it was a game they shouldn't have won. They didn't deserve to win. And it was just like, if you can just rob that game on the road and pick up those 3 points, it is one of those things that just kind of, you go throughout the week there with some confidence, and then you fly into the next game from the first minute. And it really felt like it had the chance to be one of those title winning type wins where you just scrap one away, and it was taken away from them, I think, wrongly. As do see the argument for it compared to some of the other Stonewall ones that are just wrong decisions. That one, I think, is the one that has the most lasting consequences, beyond obviously all of the Merseyside derby ones, being Van Dijk's injury and a red card, being the second red card on Thiago, and being obviously the last minute winner.
Absolutely. Okay, that's been the Liverpool.com podcast for this week. It's been the half-term report for Liverpool, if you like. We hope it's provided you with some context, some clarity maybe, I don't know. But we've certainly enjoyed doing it. So huge thanks to Ollie, huge thanks to Kai, and we'll see you next week.